Good evening, guys. Thank you, Product School, for having me here. Very excited, and thank you all for coming out. I know it's a nice day. I was just telling Brad, so I'm super happy that you guys are here tonight. Before I get started, I want you to get to know me a little bit. I grew up in New York City. I started out as a computer science major, and then I somehow meandered into an English and art major. I have spent 15 years in, that's why I have a girl with pearl earrings, things like that. One of my favorite paintings. I've spent 15 years in product and tech, primarily in e-commerce. And I found my way into product in a very non-linear way, just like many, many product managers. I've worked in design, I have worked in analytics, I've done some front end a long time ago, I've done some DBA work, and then finally made my way into product. Along the way, I've built and scaled teams and products while doing what I enjoy the most, which is really trying to solve difficult problems, interesting challenges, and using my brain. So where have I worked? So I've worked at large companies, I've worked at small companies, I've worked at a little bit in between. I started in consumer services at Verizon.com and at Time Warner. And I started to really hate it when people came to me to talk about how hard it was to order internet service, phone service, TV service online. And I said to myself, wow, it would be really great to work for a company where people loved it. And at that time, I happened to read Delivering Happiness, which was the Tony Hsieh book on Zappos. And so I made my way into retail, started working at Zappos, loved it, but wanted to really learn about startups. So worked at Runway, If Only, and now here I am today at One Kings Lane, where I run product, design, and engineering. So why am I telling you all of this? Great. I'm telling you all of this because along the way, as I've worked in different product roles, I've developed a framework to help me think through problems, assess opportunities, and come up with some sort of one-pager template, which I'm going to share with you guys tonight. So hopefully you won't find it too boring, but it really helps guide my thinking and act as a scratch pad, almost like a checklist, so that I can really use it to sort of assess, okay, what am I missing? How am I thinking through this problem? And in many ways, it's evolved over time. It's evolved as I moved from company to company. It's evolved depending on what my needs are. It's evolved based on what I've learned. But at the end of the day, it's really provided me with this common language so that I can use it to speak to designers, to engineers, take it to a kickoff, manage expectations with my stakeholders. It's been really great because we all coalesce and come upon this one pager, which is really a misnomer because a lot of times it's 2 or 3 pages, but this one pager where we all agree this is what we're trying to achieve. So you have a shared language. What happens when I don't use the one pager or I don't pay attention to it? Well, it's a little pixely, but I think you guys get the drift. Maybe it's not quite that painful, but painful nonetheless. See Terrence smiling. It is very painful. So rather than tell you guys stories that are glamorous about how successful my products were because I used this one pager, this framework, I thought it would be better to share with you guys a little bit or air my dirty laundry. Obviously not literally because that is disgusting, but share with you guys the mistakes I've made when I didn't use this one pager or this framework, or if I didn't keep it top of mind. And so I'm going to do that through 3 case studies, one from Zappos, one from At the Runway, and one from One Kings Lane. Because even today, listen, we are all human, we still make mistakes. But the whole goal here is you learn, you move on, and hopefully you don't do it again. So before we do that, though, I think we need to understand what this one pager really looks like. So it's not super complex. It's not anything new. I'm sure you guys have heard all of this. Let them pass. But I want to walk through this step by step so that we can at least go through it because it's really not about the one pager. What it is the consistency in which you use it. Because what it does is, as you continue to use it, it trains your brain to think critically and hopefully ask the right questions. So we'll do that, go through the 7 steps, and then go through the case studies. Okay, so first one is the goal. Not very, very complex, hopefully, but so classic, what is the problem or need state that I'm solving for? Who is my target audience, and why is this beneficial? If you have a hypothesis, what is it? And I realize, again, this might seem simple, but this is actually very, very hard. And the reason it's hard is because you have to keep it top of mind the entire time you're thinking through the problem, the entire time you're building your product. You always have to go back to it, because otherwise, this is where things fall down. So this is your main thing that you need to remember. A couple of things about this. Your goal is not your success criteria. So what do I mean by that? Your goal should not be, I want to raise conversion by X. Your goal is not the feature you're building. So it should never be, I'm going to launch this awesome style quiz. You need to talk about your goal in terms of the benefits to the customer and the benefits to the business. And if you don't do that, you're already starting off in the wrong foot. So remember, customer benefit, business benefit, and lastly, this goal should not change. So when you set this is the goal. So let's take an example so that it just makes it a little bit more real. We'll go through the case studies, but we'll use an analogy. It's a little bit tired, so I apologize, but my goal is, I want to make sure I phrase it correctly, because otherwise I'm already breaking my own rules. My problem statement is, I need to get people from Brooklyn to Manhattan. Okay? Brooklyn to Manhattan. So let's solve for that a little bit. What do you think that would be? Anybody? I need to get to Brooklyn to Manhattan. You can't answer because you know.
What the product would be?
Yeah.
Subway.
Yeah. Transportation. Yes. Google Maps. Obviously, you guys are a little bit more advanced than I am. I wasn't thinking that advanced, but I thought a bridge. I need to get from Brooklyn to Manhattan, so I'm going to build a bridge. But in this case, I need to remember that my goal is taking people from Brooklyn to Manhattan. Great. So then the next item on your one-pager or your framework should be success criteria. So what does that mean? How do I measure success? This is really important. Before you start anything, before you even start building, before you think about what your solution is, you have the problem statement. You need to understand what is the thing, what is the metric you're going to use to measure success. In addition to that, what is the target that you want to hit so that you can consider it a success? Because again, without it, how do you know something is working or not working? So make sure you establish that beforehand and be thoughtful about your success criteria. It's not necessarily the universal key performance indicators that your company might have, right? Like for an e-commerce company, conversion is always like this holy grail. Well, success criteria doesn't always have to be conversion. It doesn't have to be, sorry, I come from e-commerce, so it's all e-commerce, but it doesn't have to be the revenue that you're getting. For this particular problem that you're solving, what is the exact success criteria in order for you to understand what that success is? So let's go back to the bridge analogy. It's probably going to be the number of people that I can get across, right? So, but how do you set that success criteria? You're gonna need a target. So the first thing you have to do is gather whatever you can, as much as you can, in order to set up a benchmark. And from that benchmark, you can at least logically extrapolate what proper success should look like. So again, with the bridge, let's say without the bridge, we have, I don't know, 10 people going from Brooklyn to Manhattan because they swim, they do whatever. They have a boat, great. So with that said, okay, maybe we can take, because we have this bridge, it's going to be much easier. It's going to be 100 people in a month that can go from Brooklyn to Manhattan. So the other thing that I want to leave you guys with is when you set your criteria, and again, this probably is something that's very familiar. Don't get distracted by the cat, please. I know, oh my God, playing chess with the cat, but when you set success criteria, make sure you set SMART success criteria. And I'm sure you've heard this already. It needs to be specific. It needs to be measurable. It needs to be attainable, relevant, and time-bound. So what did I just say? 100 people in a month. I think we could probably get that falling under this SMART success criteria. Okay so far? All right, awesome. The next thing is background. So what do I mean by background? Ask yourself, is there any relevant background information that could help you solve this problem? Have there been any sort of issues or known problems that stopped others from building this product before? Now, I'm not talking about useless information like, well, it's impossible. That's not really going to help you. But maybe there was an MVP, or maybe there was, I don't know, past versions that you could actually harness and learn from in order for you to be informed on how to formulate your solution. So make sure that you take a look at that, but don't let it derail you or don't let it distract you from what you're trying to do. I think the main thing here really is you want to use it as almost background information to inform the steps you're taking as you're solving the problem. So it might very well be, again, going back to the bridge, which is probably getting tired, but let's go back to the bridge. People used to get across the bridge, again, only 10 people, because, 10 people because they were swimming, so there was already this success. There was this ability to get across. So that is not an impossibility. How do we use that then to inform our decision making? Well, if people can get across, then perhaps by making it easier by adding this bridge, we can exponentially increase it by X, thus supporting your success criteria that you've already been thinking about. The next thing is critical requirements. And I think critical is going to be a really important component to this, because you need to ask yourself, what are the must-have key features to solve this problem? We're not talking about the nice-to-haves, but the key must-haves. Think about how you're going to, what needs to be included in order for you to differentiate your solution from the competition. If this is an MVP, what is the must-have in order for you to learn what you're looking to learn? So, again, this isn't meant to be a list, because remember, you have your one page, you're still going to do requirements. You're still going to do your user stories. But this is not meant to be a whole list or definitive list of all your features. It's really just starting at a high level, what you know is a must-have already to start a dialogue. So what might happen is you're building a bridge and you know that VIPs need to get across. And you're like, oh, I need to care for those VIPs. Maybe I need to add a red carpet to my bridge. Does that sound like a must-have feature? Yeah. No, it doesn't. But remember that by thinking about these things, you already know immediately, okay, what is this version going to look like? What are the things that are, again, absolutely important? So what would probably be important? Again, going back to my goal. If I'm having a hard time thinking about my critical features or critical requirements, I need to go back to my goal. I need to get them from point A to B. I said I needed to do 100 people in a month. Okay, so it probably needs to be very sturdy, right? So forget about the red carpet, it just needs to be sturdy. So that will probably drive at the very top, one of the key features that it needs to have. Do you have a question?
No, I thought you were going to ask us what the feature.
Ah, okay. Damn. Next time I'll call on you. And again, be mindful that this isn't just going to be this collection of super cool features, bells and whistles. Don't get distracted by that. Go back to your goal if you need a reminder. It's got to solve for that goal. And this is also extremely important. Each one of these are so important, but this one in particular. Ask yourself, what will not be included in this version? There's going to be a lot of nice to haves. You're going to have a lot of options on the table. What is absolutely important that you have to remember when assessing a solution, while it's important to say what is critical, it is equally important to say what is not. You need to be able to say why as well, because trust me, what's going to happen is you're going to have a stakeholder come to you and say, Andrea, it's very important that we have this red carpet. It's a must-have. You've already thought through a lot of this, at least to start, again, because of your one-pager. So you'll be able to say, yes, absolutely, red carpet, absolutely important for our VIPs. Not for this release. We're going to put it in the parking lot for now. But at least you know already, there's a way for you to acknowledge, you guys are laughing, way for you to acknowledge that you thought through this. You're acknowledging it. You're building this sort of rapport with your stakeholders, but you're also at least keeping in mind that what is important is in for this scope, and what is not so important, you can put aside for later. Because trust me, those conversations will happen. And listing them out, honestly, I think to start with, it doesn't only help in terms of the dialogue or your conversations with them, but level setting, right? Like there's going to be no escalations because this is a must-have. They can see that, oh, it's going to come in a future iteration. Okay, competitive landscape. This one, I think, pretty straightforward, but I think you need to ask yourself, who is doing what you want to do well? Who is not doing it well, and what can you learn? Because it's very tempting to look at the competitive research that you do and say, okay, I'm just going to look at what everybody's doing, or what is Amazon doing? But in the end, that is not why you look at the competition. You look at the competition so that you can understand why something is great and why something is not great. And so that you can formulate specifically how you can differentiate your solution from the pack. So I might say, okay, I see this bridge, it's made of wood, it's warped from the water. Okay, that's one. I see this other bridge made of glass, and it always gets cracked. Either one of those, I have some learnings, probably not going to do either one. Last one is probably a little bit, I don't know, controversial. Fine. So, usually not a fan of setting hard deadlines without understanding scope. Not truly, but I think it's still important enough to put down here. So, are there critical timelines for this feature? And the reason you want to know, I mean, are there any marketing efforts? Are there any dependencies for this launch? You want to know this going in, not because you're agreeing to it, but because you want to understand, again, the whole opportunity. Maybe it's such a great solution that you want to shout it out and give a talk at South by about it. But you need to have that under your one pager so that you are able to consider it and do have a conversation with your cross-functional partners. Again, not to say that you guys are agreeing with it, but so that you could start a dialogue and perhaps set some proper milestones. Who knows, you might be able to make it. But I think it's another piece that is still important to consider. And again, critical timelines, not just because, I don't know, your boss wants you to launch it in 4 weeks. All right. You've asked yourselves many, many questions. I certainly have, and given myself a lot of advice. So what happens when you don't follow it? Not that I seldom follow it. I try to follow it as much as I can, but I want to dive in now that we've walked through the framework, which I think it's pretty straightforward, right? But again, a lot of thinking. I want to show you guys now what happens when you don't follow it or don't keep it top of mind. So, case study number 1 is Zappos VIP. How many here have heard of that little shoe company called Zappos? How many people have shopped there before? Do you know if you're a VIP or not? You are, okay. All right, wonderful. Okay, so we built Zappos VIP. It was actually a program that started before I started there, and then I took it over as one of my products. Really, really awesome. The perks that you get, like next business day delivery, you get expedited returns, you get a special 800 number, you get so many things like a point store in Zaponia, which I'll explain a little bit. But let's take a look at what the framework would have looked like had I been there, let's say day 1. Okay. Let's take a look at it for a second. So, 2 goals: rewarding our most loyal customers. Oh, but also this other thing. We want to encourage direct visits by going to a special site, which was vip.zappos.com. Success criteria? Oh, I don't really know. Maybe to make people feel good. The background to this was, for the second goal, people would search for Zappos on Google and then click on the paid ad. Paid so much in paid marketing because of that, but that's what people did. Critical requirements? I don't know, lots of features, right? Lots of perks. What was out of scope? Competitive landscape. And timeline, we just kept building. What's wrong with this framework? Yeah, lots of question marks. That's absolutely right. Ongoing timeline. Yep. Anything else? So we, as I said, built many, many features for Zappos VIP without really, I think, considering what we were trying to do. We built things like a point store. We built things like 24 early access, things like Zaponia, which is like a Sims type of game, but set in the Zappos land with unicorns. Sounds cool, right? And then in terms of how do you become a VIP, well, anybody could. You use the app. Actually, if you're a VIP, that was another feature we built. It would rain these beautiful like VIP gold badges in the app. But use the app, you call customer service, or after you shop with Zappos, 2 months later, you become a VIP. Consequently, everybody was a VIP, which meant nobody was really a VIP. After the fact, we started asking ourselves, well, gosh, this VIP program, the number of customers are just growing. What is the value? What is the profitability of a VIP customer? And what are the perks that they really enjoy? Because if you think about it, for every perk you launch, there's definitely an opportunity cost, right? 24 early access, that means if I'm VIP, I get to see it. I might not care. You guys don't get to see it, but if you're not VIP, and there is a cost to that. So we did that research, and then we found out only a very, very small percentage of VIPs were actually valuable or profitable. And on top of that, VIPs only cared about 2 perks. Can you guess what it is? Or what those 2 are? Customer service, a dedicated number. What's the other one? Yeah, no, not even the returns. They didn't care about that. The shipping, exactly. The next business day shipping, which is very expensive. So what do you think we should do? What do you think we did?
I mean, it must have cost a fortune to build a game.
I know, yes. Yes. The point store was also a fortune because we had to build a loyalty engine behind it. And if you get like, I don't know, some 100,000 points, we gave you like a giant stuffed unicorn. I mean, yeah. Hey, listen, we were quirky. But anyway, so knowing that, only a small portion of your VIPs are valuable, only 2 perks out of maybe 20 were valuable. What should we do? Because clearly it didn't reflect that. Well, we decommissioned all the perks except for next business day shipping and the special phone number. We streamlined the VIP qualifier, so not everybody was a VIP. And if you look at it today, this is the most telling. There is no more VIP program. We now have a rewards program, same thing. And so all of that, separate site, all of that went away. I know, that was tough. All right, next one, guys. Brace yourselves. Okay, case number 2. Case study number 2 is Rent the Runway style quiz. How many here have heard of Rent the Runway? How many have rented from Rent the Runway? Quite a few. So when I was there, we had been doing personalization on the site for a while, various ways, but we really, really wanted to get more personalized content in front of the customer. And so we developed this style quiz that would then result into a personalized shop. Let's take a look at what the one-pager looked like. All right. So the goal was to test how Rent the Runway could provide more personalized content, like I was telling you guys, by creating a style quiz. The success criteria was to increase the shortlist creation. Shortlist was sort of like as you narrow down the options of the dresses that you liked by X%, and also additional monthly revenue by X amount of dollars. The background was, we were already doing some personalization on the site. Critical requirements, what was out of scope, didn't really define that. The competitive landscape, we looked at some of the competitors, even the ones that weren't doing the same thing, like True & Co., Airbnb, and Netflix. And then we had a timeline, 4 weeks, because it was going to be a summer project for our new engineers who were newly graduated from college. Okay, what do we think of this framework? It's better. Yeah, it's better. Yeah, it's a little bit better.
You said that the timeline must be critical. Summer project can be hired as it's critical.
Yeah, 4 weeks, right? That was like very arbitrary. Yeah, so like I said, it was a 4-week summer project for the new hires, and all engineers, brand new, newly graduated from college. Great. We wanted to put out this style quiz. Great. Well, because you don't define your critical requirements and out of scope, what happened was the quiz got, bless you, the quiz got more and more complicated, very complex. And we decided, we're going to build a model for an algorithm that we're going to test out. 4 weeks. Yeah. We also have to remember that these were newly college graduates. So the complexity of the project didn't really match the skill set of the junior engineers. So the project got so bloated, 8 weeks passed. We're still not quite there. Finally, the exec team was like, you need to launch something. These guys have to go to their teams. And so somehow we finished it, and we launched the quiz. Okay. What do you guys think happened? So very few people used it, like almost like, oh my God, single digits. It's terrible. So we retired it shortly after the launch. Didn't even iterate. It was just not great at all. All right, last one. How many of you have heard of One Kings Lane? That's good. All right, awesome. Anybody shopped from One Kings Lane? Hey, awesome. That's great too. Glad to hear it. Okay, so as you know, or maybe not know, so One Kings Lane, we used to be a Flash site. Our business was Flash. And now we are a lifestyle brand. So that means really more inventory on the site that lives a little bit longer, etc. So what we wanted was a homepage that would reflect the fact that we are now a lifestyle brand and not a Flash site. So let's take a look at this one pager. So our goal was to launch a more targeted homepage that's more on brand. Success criteria, not sure. But the background was obviously our previous homepage was very much geared towards the Flash model that we've left. Critical requirements is in order for you to have a new homepage, you're going to have tools to support the daily production of said homepage. Out of scope, competitive landscape, and timeline. Unknown. What do we think of this one pager, of this framework? Or the use of this framework, rather?
There's no way to tell how it will be successful.
Yeah, there's no way to tell. Absolutely. Anything else?
There's no analysis of other competitors.
Yep, it's very true.
The critical requirements, should there be more specificity around what tools you would use?
Yes, absolutely. Just, yes. Yes. So what happened? We created this homepage. Let's just go back because this was actually a screenshot of it. A homepage that was definitely much more streamlined than our old one. And definitely what we needed to do was take away a lot of the Flash aspects of it. To your point, we didn't really outline, okay, what tools do we need to update, etc. But the key thing here, and this was something that I had walked into and I was just sort of like, oh, why are we doing this? When you land on a homepage, typically, you see this hero image, right? This is called a hero image. Sorry, you okay? Okay, no, you're fine. So this is the hero image. You typically see copy on there to provide context, right? But what we wanted to, again, was this beautiful lifestyle, and what happens is you get on here and you don't know what to do. So we didn't A/B test this, but what we were finding was we were seeing more bounces, so people leaving the homepage, they see this, they leave, and reduced click-throughs, reduced clicking on the hero image. So people were definitely needing that context because they weren't figuring out, okay, what is this, what's happening, what's going on. So when you have no context, people are just absolutely confused. What we ended up doing was A/B testing a version of our homepage back with copy or context again. And not surprisingly, that version that had copy, that sort of helped the user figure out what they're seeing, won. And just the image alone, we got rid of. Even future versions of the homepage, like the one we have today, you're more than welcome to visit, onekingslane.com. Or future versions of it actually still had that hero with a contextual copy, but with now rotating like 3 heroes, all had copy because, again, same thing, you need to ground your users so that they know what they're landing on. So we learned that, unfortunately, a little bit of the hard way, but That was that. So I know 3 tough stories at least, right? 3 dirty pieces of laundry, but not everything is bad. So these are all learning opportunities that I've taken now that you really understand, okay, learning opportunities, not everything is gray and bleak. So out of every single one of those case studies, I have multiple successes when I did use the framework. So at Zappos, we launched, this amazing exchange program that we still use that they still use today. At Runway, the retail features that we ended up launching to solve and support the retail stores that they've now since opened, pick up in store, ship to store, or shop to store. All of that has been tremendously successful because of the use of one-pagers and thinking about it critically. There's a lot of cool things that we're doing at One Kings Lane that I can't talk about, that my team knows about, and they use the one-pagers, that I know will be hugely successful, at least because we've thought through it carefully as much as we can. So for every one of those mistakes, anytime you make a mistake, we're all human, use those as learning opportunities because that's how we grow. So I will leave you in summary, these key things. Focus on your goal, always your goal, because that is the thing that's going to ground you when you're solving problems. Focus on the customer, because again, without your user and your target audience, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know who you're building something for, and again, what success looks like before you start anything. Make sure you define that. That's absolutely critical. Focus on the data, validate your hypothesis, talk to real users, test stuff. And lastly, iterate a lot. Don't be afraid to fail because the only way you get better is as you learn, you course correct. And don't be afraid because trust me, we all do it, we all fail. But within that failure, there's again, a lot of learnings. I also want to share a couple of resources because again, what I've just shared with you guys is not anything new. It's just my version or my way of thinking through things. 2 of my favorite books, Simon Sinek's Start With Why. If you haven't read it yet, absolutely fantastic. And Marty Kagan's Inspired. He actually talks about the opportunity assessment. Very similar. His is like 10 questions, but again, very similar, designed to help you think through things critically. Lastly, I just want to say thank you to everybody for listening to me ramble about my one-pager. Questions? Hi.
So the mistakes for those 3 cases, can you talk a little bit about like the psychology of, like you knew what to do, and your team probably knew what to do, but there's some things that were just kind of left not done or not done as much. Thank you. Can you just talk about
yeah, of course.
How that happened?
Yes,
when
yes.
You know that those are mistakes.
Yes. So for the first one, I think, because the answer is going to be different for each of those cases. So the first one is what happens when you inherit a product, right? You start a new job. It's not like you're building the product from scratch. There's always going to be something. And what I didn't do was I went with the flow immediately. And I went with the roadmap. I just started building, and I didn't really ask those key questions because you can really do that as part of your onboarding. Understand this product of yours, even though it's there, it's live, doesn't mean you don't care for it, iterate, see its successes. I didn't do that, so that was my mistake when I started onboarding. I just went immediately robot, start building, executing. At Rent the Runway. That was all me. That was all I think, I started with a one-pager, but what I really didn't consider was really those things that I talked about. I was so excited about the feature that we were building that I forgot about really assessing the skills of that team. And they were new graduates, right? I pushed so hard that in the end, it was something that they couldn't do. and I had to like bring in my engineers to help finish it. So don't get distracted by the feature that you're building for that second case study, and you forget about the people or your cross-functional team members. And then the last one was really, I think, executive pressure. So on One Kings Lane, again, we all go through that. I didn't listen to my gut. I knew that homepage was not going to perform well, but I was new to the company. And I said something once, but I didn't really continue to make my point. And it was just sort of like, just let it ride and then we'll change it later. Which again is, the thing that I've also learned, right? You got to go with your gut. You gotta push for what you believe in. So 3 different cases, 3 different learnings for me in this case.
So questions specifically on the whole gut feeling of something is wrong or right. So now that you know kind of to trust your gut a little more, do you think it's still useful to maybe let something play out into a bad situation? Something you can present a better solution and then make it easier to get people on board. So like as opposed to fighting everybody at the outset, for example, on the homepage, like instead of fighting everyone from the very start.
Yeah. I think that's a great question. And I think, I'm sorry, but I'm going to give you a cop-out answer a little bit. I think it depends on the situation. I think because I've learned over time that you got to really say something and trust your gut, I tend to fight pretty hard. But you also don't want to get to that point where you're alienating your peers because you're fighting so hard. So I think you gotta, it's trite, but you gotta pick your battles. So what really makes the most sense? And I tell this to my team. There might be things that are just not worth fighting and just sort of like you gotta let play out. So it really depends, right? I think what drives my decisions could be the size of the opportunity, the size of the potential learning for that person who's really pushing that hard. And sort of like that's how I try to see how much am I going to push for the direction I think it should be. And I could be wrong too, right? But it's really case by case. The most recent one though, I let it ride, so we'll see.
So when you're deciding success criteria for like a new product, there's no precedent, like you're building something from the ground up or something that is more dramatic change that is hard to decide, like especially like when it needs to be quantified. How do you decide something? Like how do you decide what that number is without being too conservative or too outlandish?
Oh, that's a great question. I map it out. So I might do a 5, 10, 15% just so that I can see how big or small those leaps are. And then I always end up falling somewhere in between. But like, for example, the Runway example, I definitely mapped out 5, 10, 15, even 20. And I think this is where, you also have to like trust and see what the trends are, because if the trend tends to be a little bit conservative, then you probably go for the 5 to 10, but you want to stretch, right? So maybe it is the 15, but I do map it out. I go through that exercise so I can see the scale of the potential target that I would end up picking. And that's it. Thank you so much.